Hi, everybody, and welcome to our live stream. For those of you who have never met me before, my name is Geoff Schmidt, and I will be going through Social Security questions with you today. I'm also joined by my administrative partner, Jill, who will be the one who's actually going through the questions that I'm going to be reviewing. Just a couple of points to note here. First, thanks for the overwhelming responses. We had 312 email sent into the email link. So thanks for those that who sent in your questions in advance. It's both a good thing and a bad thing because we had to go through 312 emails, and that yielded about 350 to 360 questions. So fortunately, though, most of the questions, or a lot of the questions, were repeat questions, so we were able to cull those down to a core set of questions. But if I don't, or Jill doesn't use your name when we ask the question, it's not because we don't know you asked the question. It's because there might have been 10 other people who asked the question too, and we just used the first one who asked the question. Just a couple of things we're going to be doing here. Because there are so many people who asked the same question, we have grouped these into themes. And we have basically the number one theme from the crew here was survivor benefits. There were a dozen questions about survivor benefits. Number two is dual entitlement. Number three was taxes on Social Security. We had another large number of questions on spousal benefits and divorced spouse benefits, the earnings test, the longevity of the trust, and when to file. So those all were asked multiple times. We're going to cover them all. And I want to say that I was so touched by the questions that came through and you sharing some of your personal experiences with me. One or two actually made me a little bit misty-eyed, I'm going to be honest with you. And you know who you are. And so I'll probably respond to you personally on a private email. But just a couple of things to note here. The answers are going to fall into one of three categories. Category number one is there's only one answer. It's 1 + 1 will always equal 2. Category two, which is the vast majority of the questions that were asked and the answers that are going to be giving, is this is how it works most of the time, but I don't know your situation specifically. So look at the answer as educational rather than a professional piece of advice. And number three is I'm going to give it a guess because there wasn't enough information for me to actually come to an answer because I didn't have the opportunity to interview you. I think I'll be directionally correct, but certainly in that instance, also look at it as educational information, not professional advice. All right. I think that covers off everything. Why don't we get into it? Jill, why don't you ask the first question?
Okay, great. And just want to let you know there's a lot of thank yous and really grateful that you're here tonight doing this. So there are a lot of people saying thank you to your daughter who got you into this in the first place.
She did.
So, yeah. Okay, great. So one thing that was asked is this live stream being recorded?
Yes, it's being recorded. It'll be available for anybody who wants to watch it. I suspect it'll take a few minutes to process when we're done here. And I want to add some links to some videos that will be more fulsome answers to the questions that were asked or that we weren't able to answer because they didn't fall into the Social Security category, but yet they were good questions.
Okay, so our first question will come live from the chat box.
Okay.
And it's in the category that was asked the most, which is survivor benefits. When I pass away, when can my wife collect benefits from Social Security? Sure.
So the survivor benefit is a benefit that she can apply for immediately. I will say that there are two aspects to survivor benefit. There is the amount that the deceased was receiving or would have been receiving had they passed away or had they filed on the day that they passed away. And there is the age of the survivor. And they're two separate numbers. So number one really it's a pretty simple number. If you're already collecting Social Security, then that is the base number that your spouse qualifies for, with the exception of something called a widow's limit, which we'll get into a little bit later. And number two is if you haven't qualified for Social Security and you're under full retirement age, the SSA automatically assumes that the date you passed was full retirement age. So they give you credit for reaching full retirement age, even if you had not reached full retirement age. And if you passed away after full retirement age, they give you credit for having filed on the day that you passed. So that's one number. And then your spouse, another number. Now that number is a number that will that survivor benefit, because unless he or she is actually of full retirement age, which is possible, of course, but if they're under full retirement age, there's a reduction of the survivor benefit. The younger they file, like the SSA with everything, the younger you file for anything, the smaller the payment, but the more payments you get. Once your spouse reaches full retirement age, they get 100% of the survivor benefit, and they don't really qualify for anything above 100%, so there's no use waiting. And that formula, by the way, is etched in stone. I'll put a link in the description in this particular live stream when we're done.
Okay, next one is from JKRK. My husband has significantly higher Social Security payment than me. If my husband, currently age 71, started taking Social Security at age 68, and I am currently 64 and already taking my own Social Security, if he passes, do I get less taking his, since I'm 64, than if I wait until my own full retirement age?
So I'm gonna rephrase this question a bit. So you've got two situations. You've got one person who's receiving their own full retirement age or their own Social Security benefit, and you have another that's receiving their own Social Security benefit, and the one who's receiving their own Social Security benefit passes away, the older one. In that situation, there are two things to consider here. First is you can take the higher of the two and let the other one grow. And so in the instance of, and this is one of the rare instances where the Social Security gives you a bit of a pass on having your own benefit where you've been collecting and you switch to another benefit like a spousal benefit. But you can take one and let the other one grow. And so if you're 64 and you take the survivor benefit and you want to let your benefit grow, you can do that. If you want to keep your benefit and let the survivor benefit grow until your full retirement age, you can do that. So in either situation, you would take the best outcome for your specific situation. And I need to actually see the numbers that you're talking about to help you decide which one would be best for you. But just know you do have the flexibility to go one way or the other.
Okay, another one in this category. As a retired couple on Social Security, we receive the full earned benefit for me, and my wife receives 50% of that amount because it is greater than her earned benefit. My question is about the survivor benefit. I recently read on social media that the current administration has implemented a rule change that requires one to reapply for the survivor benefit after the death of a spouse. Is this true? And how has the rule changed?
Well, it's true that you have to apply for the survivor benefit, but it's not because of the current administration. It's always been that way as far back as I can remember. I have publications in my Social Security, the 2020s that talked about. So you do need to apply when you want the survivor benefit, but it has nothing to do with politics. It's always been that way.
We have a question coming in the chat box in relation to this, which is, does the survivor that is under full retirement age but is over 62 and your spouse passes away, are they able to get her husband's full retirement, or is a percentage deduction because they are not full retirement age?
Okay, I'm just going to give you the numbers so that you have them. So how old was the spouse when they passed away?
Does the survivor that is under full retirement age but is over 62? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your spouse passes away. Yes, so over 62.
So let's assume that the deceased was receiving their full retirement age benefit. So they were receiving 100% of their benefit. At age 67, the survivor would receive 100%. This assuming that their full retirement age is age 67. At age 66, they'd receive 95.9%. At age 65, they'd receive 91.9%. Age 64, 87.8%. Age 63, 83.7%. And so the age of the spouse, the one who's left behind, does matter, because if you file earlier, you're going to get more payments, but they're going to be smaller. It's like any other benefit from Social Security. And so that's what the reduction looks like. The offset is their own income, or if they have their own social income from that. If they are working, there are going to be earnings limits, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. But if they have their own Social Security benefit, they can let that one, they can take that one and let the survivor benefit grow, or vice versa, just like I mentioned before.
Another question in this category, or should we move to a new category?
Why don't we move to a new category, and then if we have time, we'll come back to this.
Okay, so how about earnings test?
Okay.
Mary asked, I stopped working at age 64 and plan to draw Social Security at age 70. I noticed my benefit estimate has declined slightly in the past year of non-employment. Will this decline in benefits continue until I take my Social Security benefits, and by how much percent on average earnings history? I noticed the Social Security estimate assumes you continue working and earning about the same.
Yes. So when there is it's actually a reasonably simple formula, but the SSA makes it really hard when you're trying to do it yourself. But I'll explain it in a way that I think that would be pretty easy for most people to understand. The SSA, your Social Security payment is based on your best 35 years of earnings after it's been adjusted or indexed into today's dollars. So they take your best 35 years of earnings and they divide that, or they add that all together and they divide that by 420 months. That's 35 years. And you come up with a number. That number is what is fed into a formula. The bigger the number, the bigger your Social Security payment. So if you are stopping work now, even if you have 35 years, but it's not your best 35 years, then you'll see a slight decline in the projections, because the SSA would assume that you're going to have a few more years of the higher earning outcome. Now, is it a dramatic change? Usually not. It's not usually a dramatic change unless you decided to retire at age 50 and then file for Social Security at age 62 and you had 12 years of leisure in there. Then you don't have 35 years. You might have 20. And so then the numerator becomes very, very small. But assuming that you had 30, 31, 32, 33 good years of earnings anyway, the change in your be reasonably small.
Catherine asked, I took Social Security at age 62 in 2023. I'm an author and started working 2 days a week for an attorney friend. How do I let Social Security know when I go past the income maximum of $22,400?
You call them. Yeah, you can just give them a call. You do need to let them know. And here is the reason you need to let them know. They're going to find out eventually, and it's much better for you not to have to write a really big check in a year or two when they finally catch up, because they talk to the IRS talks to the SSA, but it's not instant. They don't catch it all the time. Sometimes they do, but they don't catch it all the time. And so instead, give them a call, tell them that you are earning a certain amount of money and you expect to earn above the earnings threshold, and ask them to reduce your Social Security payment to accommodate for that. It is much easier if you do it that way than the other.
Okay, Mary asked, did I just do Mary? No. I believe I stopped working at age 64 and plan to draw Social Security at age 70. I noticed my benefit estimate has declined slightly in the past year of non-employment.
I think you just read that one to me.
That is? Okay, sorry. Okay, John asked, we're moving on to survivor benefit.
Sure.
By the way, I think we've gone through a bunch of our earnings test questions. All right. So in regards to a survivor benefit question, I have a friend who lost her husband over a year ago. She is turning 60 later this year and is still working. Her husband had been collecting Social Security before he passed away. When she becomes eligible for survivor benefits, will they be reduced because of her age and or because of the earnings test?
So you have two separate issues here, and the answer is yes and possibly. So as I mentioned before, if you file for the survivor benefit, the base amount is the amount that your partner was getting or would have been eligible to get had they filed on the day that they passed, or in the instance of having not filed and they were under full retirement age, their full retirement age amount. But that amount is going to be reduced depending on the age of the spouse who's receiving the payment. The smaller the smaller the percent of that amount. At age 60, it's 71.5%. At age 61, it's 75.6%. And at age 62, it's 83.7%. Now, in that instance, there's something called a widow's limit. And again, we're going to get into it because it is a question. I really wanted to highlight this. There's a widow's limit that actually does help in that situation quite a bit, but we'll cover that off when we get to that question.
Okay, Larry asked, as a retired couple on Social Security, we receive the full earned benefit for me.
Sorry, there was a part two to that question, and the part two was the earnings test. So the survivor benefit is subject to the earnings test. So if you're working and collecting a survivor benefit, you're subject to the earnings limit in any given year. And in 2025, that's just over 23,000 if you're under full retirement age. And so for most of you, that would be the age. But it goes up to, give me 1 second, it's right here. It goes up to 62,160 if you are applying for, or if you're earning in the year that you reach full retirement age in 2025.
Okay, so Sandra asked, what's the likelihood Social Security will go away or payments be reduced in 2033? I'm delaying taking Social Security depending on a large monthly payment. Should I distrust that and take it earlier?
Yep. So you'll never see me engage in political hyperbole on the channel. I'll tell you what I think, and it's going to be based on academic and history, academic interest in history. And I'm going to strip out all politics from this conversation. In 1983, we were within 1 month, the US was within 1 month of having no funds in the trust. Where we are in 2033 is exactly where we could be in 2033 is exactly where we were in 1983. And within a month, they shored up Social Security, put in place a mechanism to immediately increase the contributions. People paid more into Social Security with their earnings, their paycheck, and they raised the full retirement age. But they did that 17 years in the future, so it didn't affect current retirees. So if you were in 1983, if you were approaching retirement age, if you were 50 or above, I think they maybe even 48 or above, your full retirement age was age 65. But if you're under 48, maybe it was 49, then your full retirement age started to creep up in the year 2000. It went up 2 months per year after that. So it was all based on the year that you were born and when you were reaching full retirement age. I think that it's very likely that if we're in a situation where this isn't resolved by 2033, and I do think that that is a real possibility, it'll get resolved, and it'll get resolved in a similar manner as it was in 1983, and again in 1993. There was a top up of this to make sure that the fund had longevity until, well, they were thinking more like 2040 at the time, but there were mitigating factors that really pushed that in the wrong direction. So I think it's unlikely. It's possible, yes, but I think it's unlikely because there's a voting block of 55 million people receiving Social Security and their families who would have to support them if all of a sudden their benefits were cut to 70 or 80%. And I think that's a pretty big incentive for every politician out there to make sure that it gets fixed.
I know we've covered the survival benefit, and it looks like we're going to move to the spousal benefits, but there's a question in the chat box of that there's a difference between spousal benefits and survival benefits, and that he's confused about the difference between the two.
Sure. Well, first of all, spousal benefit. If you go back 50, more like 75 years, there was no spousal benefit. But there was a recognition that spouses, especially when it was put in place, they were engaged in a different type of job, and they shouldn't be penalized for it. So they put in place a spousal benefit, and it was up to 50% of the primary insured or the primary earners earned income at their full retirement age. That effectively means that you can have 150% if everything or more actually, but assuming that everybody files at full retirement age, you can have 150% of the primary earner's income or Social Security income. The survivor benefit, even though it starts with an S and it is for the spouse, is actually completely unrelated to the spousal benefit. It's what happens if someone dies and they leave behind a family in need. And do you just let them have the 50% that they would have been due as a spouse, or less if they were younger when they filed for the spousal benefit? No. So take the spousal benefit and put it aside. Has nothing to do with the survivor benefit. The survivor benefit is how do you take care of those that were left behind? And you have someone who was a good earner who is earning a reasonable social security payment. How do you transfer that to the ones that were left behind? And it goes to the spouse and to children of a certain age. So and honestly, even a parent in some circumstances. So there's a lot. It's a lot different than a spousal benefit, even though it's for the spouse primarily.
Okay, so a spousal benefit question now from Keith. My wife will reach full retirement age in August this year, though she has many years where she didn't work and her Social Security benefit will be low. I started collecting Social Security in January 2024, a couple months beyond my full retirement age, and continue to work full time. We are married 13 years, and I believe my wife is eligible to receive half the value of my Social Security, which would be more than her collecting against her benefit. Is this so? And then second to that is if her benefit is equal to half of my Social Security, the half value to hers does not increase if she waits. It would be half at 66 and 8 months full retirement age. If she waited until age 70, she would still only receive half of my benefit. Is that correct?
Yes. And let me explain what's going on here. So this is a really common question. People get confused about this all of the time. And that is, you as the primary earner can get up to 124% of your full retirement age benefit. I often thought it was weird that you would have your full retirement age your full retirement age with 100%, but you can actually go over 100% to 124%. It's like being in an AP class. You get an A+++, like a 4.5 instead of 4.0. But people confuse the fact that you can go to 124% as the primary earner, but the spouse, they cap out at 100% of the spousal benefit, which is 50%, up to 50%. And that's at full retirement age. There's no situation where the spouse can get more than 50% of the primary insurance amount, the primary earner's Social Security payment at full retirement age.
Okay. Something coming in the chat box, and it's back to the survivor benefit, but thought I should bring this up now. what if someone dies at 59
Mhm.
and the spouse is 70? Can they start claiming survivor benefits, or do they have to wait?
No, we can start. The survivor benefit, first of all, if you pass at age 59, the SSA automatically assumes that you passed away at your full retirement age. So you get 100%. And so that's block one. Block two is how old was the spouse? Does that 100% get reduced? And in this case, if the spouse is 70, well, then the answer is no, you get 100% of 100%. It doesn't go above the 100%. So even if the spouse is 70, they don't get 124% of the survivor benefit. The survivor benefit, the spouse's calculation to that caps out at 100%. But no, at 59, they can start drawing the survivor benefit.
Okay, back to spousal benefits. Could you discuss the interplay of the spousal benefit when the younger person is the primary breadwinner, as in my case?
Sorry, would you repeat that?
Could you discuss the interplay of the spousal benefit when the younger person is the primary breadwinner? Should we wait until she reaches full retirement age if she's going to receive more through the spousal benefit anyway?
I'm not sure I understand that question. Can I just see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, the spousal benefit, now I understand what they were asking. The spousal benefit is, if you have a primary insured and they filed early, let's say they filed at age 62 and they're only getting 70% of their insurance amount, the spouse can still get 50% of the primary insured's primary insurance, because if they're full retirement age or older, the two are only linked because of what the primary insured's retirement or their full retirement age benefit would be. So the spouse can entirely control how much they're going to get by waiting. And it's not linked to what the primary insured was getting paid. It's not like the survivor benefit. And just because it starts with an S doesn't mean that they're the same. They're the same thing. It starts with an S and goes to the spouse. But the longer that the spouse waits up until full retirement age, his or her own full retirement age, the larger the spousal benefit.
One more question in this category that just came in the chat box from Troy Reed regarding spousal benefit. If I retire early at 63, does my spouse get 50% of my reduced benefit or a reduced amount due to early retirement?
So that's the same question that I just answered. So at 53, you're going to get as a primary earner 75% if your full retirement age is age 67. If your spouse was to file for the spousal benefit and he or she waits until their own full retirement age, they're going to get 50% of your primary insurance amount. So you'll get 75% and they'll get 50% because it's based on when the spouse files for the spousal benefit.
Great. There's a lot of questions coming in around that, and they've been coming in earlier. So probably now there's been some clarity around that. So thanks for answering that. Okay. So I think that we should move on to a new category. A lot of questions came in regarding when is Social Security running out? And so I have from Arnold, can you trust the Social Security benefit calculation? If not, who could we hire to independently calculate Social Security income? And do you have any more updates about Social Security running out of money by 2032?
All right. So can you trust that the people at the Social Security Administration are trying to do the right thing? Yes. I think that they're good people. I think that they try to do the right thing. Most of them the ones that I've talked to view their job as very, very important, and they serve. They're there to serve. They're faced with one constraint, and this is the biggie in my mind. Although there are probably more, but the biggie in my mind is that we all collectively started working in the 80s, most of us anyway, or maybe even the 70s. And our earnings records oftentimes are not correct. Now, if your Social Security payment is based on the best 35 years of earnings and your earnings records are not correct, then whatever you put in the formula on the back end is going to be wrong. So what I talk to people about is scrubbing their numbers. Go back, and you can do this right on My Social Security. You can go right on the website and click into your own account by year, where you worked and how much you got paid. Now, I actually did it because I'm working on really interesting projects, which I'll share on the next live stream. But I forgot that I had worked as a karate instructor. I forgot that I was working as a karate instructor at a point in my life. I thought I had only done it for 2 years, but it turned out I did it for 4. And that's when I was just turning 18. The point was that the income was there, and had I not looked, I wouldn't have known. Now, honestly, it wasn't my best 35 years of earnings, but had it been, it would have been important to know. So go in and check your numbers and make sure that they're right. As far as paying someone to recalculate it, it's such a simple formula. You don't need to do that. I'll put a link in the video description here later today on how to calculate your Social Security payment. I've got one, and it's super simple. What was the other question?
Well, one more in this category. Oh, the other question to this was, do you have any more updates about Social Security running out of money by 2032?
Yep. So everything I've read is said 2033, but then you read something else that says 2034, and something else says 2032. A lot of it, believe it or not, depends on interest rates. The higher the interest rate, the more the investments that the trust invests in, which are government bonds, generates. So that means that they're put back into the trust, which they are put back in the trust. So if interest rates stay higher, the trust has longer longevity. So, but regardless, going back to the point I made before, in 1983, we were, right now in the Social Security Trust, there's $2.7 trillion. And that's just sitting there invested in government bonds, notes, and treasury bills. If you were to ask me when the peak was, it was in 2020 at 2.9 trillion. So it's come down about 0.2 trillion. Still a big number. There's this wave of retirees that are coming through, the baby boomers, that were generating all of this revenue that was being contributed, that was dumped into the trust. And so it looked like it was going to go on forever. 1983, they figured it out, and actually they needed to make some adjustments anyway because the wave had started. But more importantly, we're still pretty close to the peak. So there's no funny business going on. It's just that you have this wave of people that are coming through. So on the flip side, now you've got this problem 2033, just like we had in 1983, and you've got a life of people who've contributed for their entire life to Social Security, and it's although it's called an entitlement, it's not really an entitlement because you paid for it. So my strong belief is that as we get closer to 2033, two things are going to happen. They're going to raise the Social Security tax from 6.2% to something else, and they will probably implement an increase in full retirement age in the distant future. So just like in 1983, they waited until 2000 for it to become effective. It's not going to sneak up on anybody in 2032 that they thought they were retiring at age 67 and surprised it's age 69. I think that's highly, highly unlikely. And I think it'll get sorted out. It's just when it's needed, it's going to be closer to 2033. I think so.
Okay. And so along that line, many people have asked, and saying that they're delaying taking their Social Security, depending on getting a larger monthly payment. But should they be able to trust that because there's this doubt of whether or not it's still going to exist in 2032 or past.
Well, it's not an ironclad guarantee, but if it were me, I would make the decision based on the fact that it's going to be there. But like a lot of things, there's nothing that's completely promised. But the logic and the data suggests that if they do that, if they take 30% or 20% away from 55 million people that are in retirement, where they cut people's Social Security by 20 or 30% as they're going into retirement, those politicians aren't going to have a job. And so I think it's unlikely that it's going to be the big fear issue. Now, I can understand why the fear is there, because no one's announced the solution yet, but there are a lot of people talking about the right solutions. And there are a lot of people that are talking about solutions I don't think are going to pass. But I think the easiest solution is going to be just increasing the Social Security tax by a very small percent.
And so if you're already, this is coming from Jock Stooks, who's in the chat box, that if you are already collecting Social Security, might the amount be reduced after the year 2032?
If they don't get it fixed, then sure. I think that, as I said before, I think that's highly unlikely that they're not going to fix the issue. There are so many I've never heard a politician, despite all the rumors out there, I've never heard a politician say, hey, there's this really big opportunity here to cut costs. Let's go raid Social Security. They've talked about other government entitlement programs, but not Social Security. Social Security is sacrosanct. It would be the death of a politician's career if they supported something like that. So show me one that says I'm in favor of it, and I'll show you one who won't be in office in a few years.
So I think this brings us then to, when should we start taking Social Security? And there's a bunch of questions in this category.
Mm-hmm.
So one is, what are some of the key factors I should consider in starting my Social Security at age 62 versus full retirement age?
Yep. So the vast majority of people start at 62 or 63. The numbers actually are massive. And I would say, not for all the wrong reasons, but some of them are for the wrong reasons. And that's because that's what their buddy told them, or that's what their brother did, or their sister did, or that's what their boss did. That's not a great reason to start at age 62. Now, age 62, there are really good reasons to start at age 62. You can start at age 62 because you have dependent children, and there will be a benefit for the children at age 62, but maybe they'll grow up and be out of the house by the time you reach full retirement age. And so there's the child benefit. Or you're the lower earner with a spouse who's in poor health, and so the survivor benefit is likely at some point in the future, and you have your own Social Security, and so why not take that? Or your spouse is the lower earner and they're older than you. Same exact way of thinking, but just with a different fact pattern. Or, and this is the one that actually a lot of people fall into this category. In fact, too many, unfortunately. They just need the money now. Life's been hard. They've tried their best and they didn't crack the code. And you talk to these people, and a lot of them, it's just not their fault. And others, sure, they were out doing the wrong thing, but you talk to some of them and they were just put in a bad position because they just read it wrong. And so whatever your reason, and these are four of the most common, but whatever your reason, first of all, don't let anybody tell you that it's the wrong reason. Just the only thing I would say is, don't do it because your friend did it or your boss did it, and make sure it's a data-backed decision. You've actually taken the time to analyze it, because there was an article that was written that said 96% of people take Social Security at the wrong time. Do I believe it's 96%? Well, I read it and I know the data and how they presented it. It looked like directionally it was a large number. I don't think it was 96%, but a lot of people are taking Social Security at the wrong time. But if there's a valid reason, of course, you should consider it.
Okay. In the same category, I took Thomas asked, I took early retirement at age 61 and I'm approaching age 62. My full retirement age is 67. My wife is approximately 4 years older than me and her full retirement age is 66 and 10 months. She's had a much smaller salary range and took off paid work for many years, working hard to raise our kids. She would receive more Social Security from the spousal benefit than she would from her own Social Security, even if I start taking mine at 62. I'm in good health and don't particularly need Social Security income to live on before full retirement age, as I have 401k and IRAs and I can draw that down in coming years. This would have some benefit in reducing the required minimum distributions down the road. However, if I do start Social Security at age 62, then I could take less from those qualified accounts and let them continue to grow. So what are some of the key factors I should consider in starting my Social Security at age 62 versus full retirement age?
I think it's a similar question as the one before. There's something that people talk about, and I just want to get clear on the thinking here. There are a lot of people that say, and this doesn't sound like the situation, but there are a lot of people that say, I'm going to take Social Security at age 62 and I'm going to invest it. And my very next question is, how are you going to live? And they say, well, I'm going to take from my investments to pay for my life. And so you're putting money from Social Security into your investments only to take it back out again. In that scenario, it doesn't seem to me like the most rational approach with your Social Security. If you're taking Social Security because you're retiring and you want to let your other investments grow, I think it's just a cost benefit analysis. And look at your Social Security payment, look at the performance of your investments, work with a financial advisor to go through the numbers. The numbers actually, oftentimes they don't pan out the way you think. Now, you've got one set of issues, and then you have the spousal issue, which is in some ways it's actually completely separate. And so if you take the earlier you take Social Security, the earlier your spouse can claim the spousal benefit. If your spouse, is that right?
Yes.
66 and 10, full retirement age, they're capped out. So they're going to get 50% of your 100%, no matter when you file. And so back to the point I made before, which is if your spouse is older, maybe it makes some sense to file earlier because they're not going to continue to grow past 50%. They're going to be capped out at 50%.
Okay. So we're gonna move on to we still have one more in the taxes on Social Security.
Sure.
And then we're going to move on to another category since we are already left with only 15 minutes.
Okay.
So Rick is asking, when Social Security is taxed at either 50% or 85%, is it the whole amount or only the part that is over the allowed income amount?
Okay. So yes. So this is one that are out there. So first of all, questions that came through on taxes on Social Security. There's a difference between 50% of your Social Security being taxed and you paying 50% tax on your Social Security. And people, for whatever reason, they get confused and they think that they're going to the Social Security 50% of it's going to go to the government, or 85%. That's not the case. All you're doing, no matter how you get there, if you have 50% of your Social Security that's being taxed, that's just your ordinary income. It gets taxed at your ordinary income rates. Oftentimes you can get to 50%. And because of just the way you structured your lives, even if 50% of your Social Security is taxable, you don't pay any taxes on it because you have deductions and you have other benefits, exemptions and things like that. So, so if that's the question, you only pay ordinary income tax on the amount of your Social Security that's being taxed. If the question is, how does my Social Security get taxed? Well, there's a formula called combined income. and it's 50% of your Social Security payment plus tax-free income from muni bonds, basically, and your adjusted gross income. All of that's added together. And if you're married and it's less than 32,000, well, none of your Social Security becomes taxable. If it's between 32 and 44,000, up to 50% of your Social Security can be taxable, but it's up to 50%. And above 44,000, up to 85% of your Social Security can be taxed. It doesn't mean you're getting taxed 85%. It just means it can be taxed up to 85%. And by the way, the same thresholds if you're single are 25,000, no tax, 25 to 34,000, up to 50%, 34,000 plus, up to 85%.
Okay, there's a question in regards to the means test. Jack asked, I've been tracking my Social Security statement for probably 10 years or more. I've done fairly well for my family and anticipate a very good income in retirement from multiple income streams. My goal is to retire at 65 in about 18 months, but not withdraw my Social Security until full retirement age at 67 or possibly even later. My concern is with the challenges Social Security is facing. Do you anticipate a means test being put in place?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. So first of all, Social Security, by the way it's designed, gives more money from every dollar contributed to Social Security to those of lower income than those of higher income. It's without getting into the calculations, the first bucket of Social Security, 90% of a certain amount goes back to everybody. And then the next bucket, 32% goes back to the next income tier, and the next bucket, 15% of the next income tier. So the more you earn, the less you get per dollar contributed to Social Security. So it's already slanted to help those most in need. Could we do more? Sure. There are a lot of ways I can think of to do more, but in terms of taking someone who's arranged their life to have a good retirement, well, there's a lot of politics around language that's out there, but I don't think most people would say you did a good job, therefore we're not going to give you what you contributed to all your life. I think that's highly unlikely.
In the chat box, Kathy Hines just said, what's a means test?
It's a term that it's not a Social Security term. It's just a everyday term out there, which basically means that if you have a lot of money, or if you have a reasonable amount of money, and you don't need it, well, then you're not going to get as much as someone else who needs it more. And I don't know why it's called a means test, but basically it means that those who need it most get more than those who don't need it most. But it has nothing to do with Social Security. It's already defined in actually the Social Security Act of 1933.
There were quite a few questions in regards to the Social Security Administration website. And so I'll give you a few of those. Jane asked, I've been listening to your YouTube videos regarding retirement for almost a year now. Thank you, Jane. I love how you state the facts without the need for all the fluff. Oh, okay. So the question is, I'm married, working full time, but I haven't recently had the talk with my boss. I'll be working less hours starting this summer for the next year as a semi-retirement plan before going all in next year at or around full retirement age. My current estimated benefit per the Social Security website is $2,579. My question is regarding the retirement calculator sliding scale. Is that the amount of my benefit after all the calculations you have mentioned? PIA, AIME, bend points, etc., already factored in? Or do those calculations still need to be processed before your actual benefit amount is known?
Okay, so more fluff in future videos. No, that's not what she was asking. Oh, no. Sorry. So just all kidding aside, let me give you what those acronyms mean in case you want to look them up. PIA means primary insurance amount. AIME means average index monthly earnings. And bend points that's the formula that I talked to you about before, where the first bucket, everybody gets it, including the people with the least amount of income. Next bucket, it gets cut back to 32%. Next bucket, 15%. So the question is, can you trust the SSA website? Well, if you go back to my point before, first of all, I think you can trust that people are trying to do the right thing at the SSA. I think you can also, I think you should check your earnings history. I've heard too many horror stories just to be sure. And there's just scan it, just eyeball it, see if it looks right to you. And if it does, cool. If you feel like you're missing something, back in the 80s and 90s, I got to tell you, there was a lot of funny business with employers. Small business employers would do things where they didn't file your taxes, and then they would change documents, and they never got caught. Today they'd go to prison for a decade, but back then they never got caught. So look at your earnings history. As far as the actual calculations, the earnings history is right. It's going to be directionally correct. The only thing that you can't do on the website is it's not going to be able to predict what you earn in the future, and it's not going to be able to predict the cost of living adjustment, which happens to your Social Security payment from 62 on. And so I would say that there are some variables that don't make it perfect, but it should be there or thereabouts, would be my guess. For you specifically, I would assume, but I know I've looked at mine and it seems about right.
Yeah, so I think that answers Martin's question of how accurate are those estimates online shown in your profile?
I would say that you use them as a guideline, not as the holy grail. I think that their accuracy is going to be dependent on a few things. One is how recent is the information. Most people tend to earn more later in life than they do earlier in life. And if they haven't, if your last year's earnings hasn't made its way in there, and it's possible that could be the case, or if your last 2 years aren't in there and this is your biggest earning part of your life, it's going to be less accurate because they take the best 35 years indexed to today's dollars. So check it, make sure that your earnings history is correct. And then the rest of it is just formulaic, and everybody uses the same formula.
Okay, a question regarding Social Security payments being recalculated from Marcus. If my last year of full-time work in 2024 is one of my highest 35 years, will my 2025 Social Security monthly payment amount be recalculated? The Social Security Administration representative said yes, and that it would be reflected as an increase sometime in 2025.
Yeah. I mean, they can't not give it to you. And if you assume there's a lot of fear in the system right now around a lot of things. Social Security is in the spotlight a lot, but assuming that people at the SSA, and I think they are, no one is in there trying to find a way to get you. And not that I'm suggesting that that's the case, but I saw some of the questions that we didn't talk about, and they were convinced that the people were out to get them. But you can assume that because it's a simple formula, and you can assume that the formula is the same for everybody, that the output should be the 2024 number should be in your 2025 outcome at some point. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but whenever the data gets in there. Data management is actually quite limited at the Social Security Administration. This is a big Achilles heel for them, because some of their systems were from the 80s, some of them are from the 90s, some of them from the 2000s, and they're accumulating and bringing data together. And we have different systems talking to each other. They don't necessarily work right. So going back to my point before, check the information. But I think you can assume that once it gets in there, they'll do the right thing, because it's just math.
A question in regards to 401k benefits from John. 2 months ago, I was furloughed from my job for 3 months. Fortunately, I was able to use 8 weeks of vacation time, which I had accumulated. In 5 weeks, I anticipate being terminated by my employer. My health insurance will expire at the end of May, but I've registered for Medicare Parts A and B and will register with other supplemental Medicare insurance after my termination is official. I'm 68 and a half years old, and I don't want to draw down on my Social Security until I turn 70. I plan on spending my severance, 5 months of savings, and hopefully get some part-time contract work. Overall, I'm in excellent shape for my age. My question is it better for me to spend a good bit of my savings before collecting Social Security or file next month? The difference between filing now and 18 months from now is almost $1,000 per month. If I live another 15 to 20 years, I feel I'm leaving a lot of money on the table. Am I correct in assuming I should use my 401k as a buffer?
His name is Marcus.
John,
sorry. So John, this goes back to that big disclaimer I gave at the beginning of the live stream, which is take this as educational, not professional advice. But here's how I think about this particular issue. First of all, there are so many variables that we haven't talked about. What's the performance of your 401k? What type of investments are you in? Do you feel comfortable with the future? Because there's a lot more variability in your investments than there is in Social Security. Social Security is going to be exactly what the formula says it's going to be. So if you're comfortable with all of that, two things to consider. Number one, are you looking to build a legacy for the people you leave behind, which would favor taking Social Security earlier? Or are you looking for cash flow while you're here, which would favor taking Social Security later? Now, that is completely without knowing your situation at all. And the reason I responded to it is because it was asked so many times, because, and everybody, it's the same question. I've got a 401k, I've got Social Security, I can use the 401k to delay taking Social Security. Should I do it? Well, people do it. They do it all the time, but it really is going to depend on, it's more than money in this case. It's about other objectives about with your life. And so I actually have a video on this, and I'll put that in the description below. I filmed it years ago, and I don't think it got a lot of views. Maybe it'll get more views this time. Who knows?
As we're approaching the end, we only have 3 minutes left. I thought maybe we'll take one more question from the chat box, and then wrap up. So James Parker mentions or asks, I will have health insurance from my employer till I turn 65. Do I need to start Social Security benefits to claim my Medicare, or can I wait before starting Social Security benefits?
Sorry, would you mind repeating that one more time?
I will have health insurance from my employer until I turn 65. Excuse me. Do I need to start Social Security benefits to claim my Medicare, or can I wait before starting Social Security benefits?
You don't need to start taking Social Security to claim Medicare. In fact, and this is where people get confused on this point. Social Security takes your Medicare payment from your Social Security check when you're taking Social Security, when you're receiving Social Security. But that's not the only way that they can get paid for the cost of Medicare Part B. The other way is to just set up an automatic pay to the government, or I suppose you can send them a check. But that wouldn't be I would not take Social Security just so you can start, so that they can take Medicare from your Social Security check. And this is an interesting question, because one of the other questions is asked me to do a separate live stream on Medicare, which I'm happy to do at some point. But if you had to take Social Security to receive Medicare, everybody would take Social Security at age 65. And so, but you have people that wait until they're 70, even people that aren't working. A lot of people that aren't working, they just want to do what we talked about before, which is they'll use their 401k. So you don't need to take Social Security to start Medicare.
Yeah, there's a lot of great Medicare questions in here. So that might make for a really nice live stream in the future. We are at 7:59, and I know you'll probably want to wrap up. There's been a lot of great chat in the chat box, a lot of great questions. So tell us, What's next?
All right. So should I tell them? All right. So I'll be making an announcement of something that I'm doing. Really, I think it's very special. Something I've been working on for about 6 months, and it's going to enhance what we do here today. I can't tell you what it is yet because I am working 80 hours a week on it, but it's going to be very, very good for a lot of people. It has nothing to do with the channel outside of the fact that it'll help the same people on the channel. My intent is for the channel to bring it from 2 to 3 videos a week to 3 to 4 videos a week. I'll do a live stream. If you like the live stream, let me know, and I'll come back. I'm assuming I was able to answer most of your questions in a satisfactory way. And in the meantime, what I would plan to do is do the live stream at least monthly to start, and then I'll make another announcement in about 2 or 3 months on something I think you're really going to like.
And there's a lot of love coming in through the chat box, a lot of thank yous, very helpful, well spent hours. Love to see you live. So there's a lot coming in right now. So thank you so much to all the listeners.
Well, thanks, gang. I really appreciate you taking an hour of your evening to be with me. And for those that sent in the questions, thank you for sending in the questions, all 300 or 400 of them. For those of you that wrote in the questions, thanks for writing in the questions. And we'll probably plan a little bit better next time so that we can get through more of the questions, because there's a lot that I would love to have gotten through. There were some really good questions. We just had to make some decisions because there were big categories we actually had to hit. But if there's one that was super important to you, send an email to the live stream and we'll see if we can get it answered. Livestream@holyschmidt.com. We'll see if we can get it answered offline. Otherwise, we'll tackle it on the next live stream in about a month, if not before.
And there's just someone that just mentioned, and I think we mentioned this at the beginning, but will this live stream session be posted for viewers to watch after the fact?
It will be. So what happens next with the live stream is that I click end stream. I've never done it before. This is my first one, but I click end stream, and then YouTube will take it and they have to process it. And so I think they have to process it from low definition to high definition. It might take 10 minutes or 30 minutes. I'm not sure how long it takes. It wouldn't take more than 30 minutes. And then it'll be available for you to look at, and make sure you send it to your friends. If they weren't able to watch the live stream, I'd love for them to join the Holy Schmidt family. Make sure you click subscribe and turn on notifications and ask them to do the same. Thank you. And then it'll be available for you. And as I said, I'm going to post some videos that answer some of the questions in more detail that were the big themes in here, because I've actually put a video up on basically every single one. We have now 350 videos on the channel. Most of them are about Social Security. I'll put the videos in there that really relate to the questions that we talked about here today. And I look forward to seeing you in about 2 to 4 weeks. I'll send out a notification at various means. I'll find you and let you know when the next live stream is happening. Thanks, everybody. And I will talk to you later. Thank you, Jill, for your expert guidance throughout the last hour or so. All right.
Loved it. This was great.
I'm going to end it here, and we'll see you soon. Bye, all.